You have exactly 10 seconds to withdraw that statement, or I will hold you in contempt and have you removed from my courtroom." The gavel hovers mid-air. Judge Harlan Meeks leans forward, face flushed the particular shade of crimson that comes from decades of unchallenged authority meeting its first obstacle. The woman at the witness stand does not flinch. She is unremarkable in every visible way: plain navy blouse, no jewelry, hair pulled back in a simple twist. Nothing about her suggests she is anything more than what she claimed: a passing traveler who witnessed an eviction 3 days ago. Nothing except the way she holds herself, the way her hands rest flat on the wooden rail, steady as surgical steel, the way her eyes track the bailiff's movement toward her without her head turning even a fraction of an inch. Meeks has sat on this bench for 22 years, has signed 743 orders, has never, not once, had a witness refuse to comply with a direct instruction, until now. The bailiff's hand closes around her wrist, squeezes, twists at an angle designed to leave marks where cameras cannot see. She does not pull away. "Your Honor," her voice carries clear through the silent courtroom, "I maintain my testimony." What Judge Harlan Meeks does not know, what no one in Chambers County knows, is that 3 weeks ago, the Alabama State Gazette published an executive appointment on page 47, a routine notice that no one in this rural courthouse bothered to read. The woman he is about to have dragged from his courtroom is the newly appointed state prosecutor for civil rights and elder abuse, and she has been investigating him for 14 months. If you're watching a story about satisfying justice against a corrupt system, you're in the right place. Subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens next. 72 hours earlier, the office still smelled like cardboard and fresh paint. 4th floor of the Alabama Justice Building, Montgomery. Afternoon light slanted through windows that faced east, catching dust motes that drifted between unpacked boxes. A nameplate sat on the desk, still wrapped in plastic. Simone Aldridge, State Prosecutor, Elder Rights Division. Simone peeled the plastic away slowly, ran her thumb across the engraved letters. 15 years of work compressed into 3 lines of brass. The file on her desk was thicker than her forearm. She opened it for the 4th time that day, spreading photographs and documents across the laminate surface in precise rows. Each piece of paper represented a family. Each photograph showed land that had belonged to someone's grandparents, great-grandparents, ancestors who had scraped and saved and paid cash in an era when black families could not get bank loans. 73 cases. 73 guardianship orders signed by the same judge in Chambers County over 6 years. 73 elderly black landowners declared incapacitated, their property transferred to court supervision, then sold, always sold, to the same buyer. Vance Properties, LLC. Her predecessor had built this file over 14 months before retiring, had flagged the pattern, documented the correlation, noted the statistical impossibility of coincidence, but he had never gathered enough evidence for prosecution. Simone pulled a single complaint from the stack. Curtis Beaumont, filed 18 months ago on behalf of his grandmother, Odessa Mabry, 82 years old, owned 12 acres of land her father had purchased in 1947, declared incapacitated without notice, without hearing, without legal representation. The complaint had been forwarded to the Chambers County District Attorney. The complaint had disappeared. Simone closed the file, checked her watch, 3:47 p.m. If she left now, she could reach Chambers County before dark, could observe the courthouse, the community, the patterns that documents alone could not capture, could see for herself whether 73 families had been robbed under color of law. She packed a small bag, 2 changes of clothes, toiletries, the plain navy suit she saved for court appearances. No briefcase. No identification beyond her driver's license. Nothing that would mark her as anything other than what she planned to claim. A consultant, passing through. The drive took 3 hours and 12 minutes. Interstate gave way to state highway. State highway narrowed to county road. Strip malls and chain restaurants thinned to gas stations and feed stores, then to nothing at all. The GPS showed Chambers County as a green patch of rural Alabama, population listed as 2,847 souls scattered across 400 square miles. The courthouse sat at the center of town like a tumor. Red brick, 2 stories, built in 1952 according to the cornerstone. Confederate monument on the lawn, a marble soldier with his rifle pointed south toward nothing. The flagpole in front leaned 15 degrees off vertical. No one had bothered to fix it in what looked like decades. Simone drove past without slowing, noted the single entrance, the parking lot with 12 spaces, the security camera mounted above the front door at an angle that would capture faces but miss anything happening below chest height. The Pineview Inn sat half a mile outside town. Single-story motel, 12 rooms, a flickering vacancy sign that had probably been flickering since the Reagan administration. The clerk behind the desk was a white woman in her 60s, with steel gray hair and the particular expression of someone who had seen everything and approved of none of it. She looked up when Simone entered, looked her over from head to toe with a slowness that was not quite examination and not quite insult. "Help you?" "I need a room for a few nights." The clerk's eyes lingered on Simone's face, on her clothes, on the overnight bag that was neither expensive enough nor cheap enough to place her in any familiar category. "You here for the factory job fair? Just passing through?" "Passing through to where?" Simone smiled. The smile did not reach her eyes. "Wherever the road takes me." The clerk held her gaze for a long moment, then slid a registration card across the counter without looking at it. "Room 7. End of the row. Checkout's at 11. She paused. "Ice machine's broken." Room 7 smelled like mildew and industrial cleaner. The carpet was brown in a way that might have been intentional, or might have been decades of accumulated stains. The bed sagged in the middle. The window faced the parking lot, which faced the road, which faced nothing. Simone set her bag on the bed, pulled out her phone. No signal. Not surprising this far from any tower. The motel's Wi-Fi password was written on a laminated card that had been laminated so many times the text was barely legible. She connected, opened her email. 14 messages from the office, none urgent. One from investigator Ray Hollins, marked high priority. Check-in protocol activated. Confirm receipt within 24 hours. She typed a reply. On site. Observation only. Will report within 48 hours. Sent. Then she opened the file she had photographed before leaving Montgomery. Zoomed in on a property map of Chambers County. Found the address listed in Curtis Beaumont's complaint. 247 County Road 12, Odessa Mabry's land. Tomorrow she would drive there. Would see for herself whether the pattern in the documents matched the reality on the ground. Tonight, she would eat dinner. The only restaurant open after 7 p.m. was a diner 3 blocks from the courthouse. Hand-painted sign out front. Earl's Eats. A bell jangled when Simone pushed through the door. The conversation stopped. Not gradually, not subtly. Stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. 8 faces turned toward her. 8 pairs of eyes tracked her movement from the door to an empty booth near the back. 8 mouths that had been talking about weather or crops or local gossip went silent and stayed silent until she sat down. Then the murmuring started. Simone did not look up, did not acknowledge the attention. She studied the menu, laminated, sticky with something she chose not to identify, and waited. The waitress took 11 minutes to approach. "What can I get you?" "Coffee. The meatloaf special." The waitress wrote nothing down. "Meatloaf's out." "Then the fried chicken." "Also out." Simone looked up, met the waitress's eyes. The woman was perhaps 40, blonde hair tied back, expression carefully neutral in a way that was not neutral at all. "What do you have?" "Burger, fries." "That'll be fine." The waitress left. The food arrived 23 minutes later. Cold, overcooked, the burger so dry it crumbled when Simone cut into it. She ate anyway, left a $20 bill on a $7 check, walked out without looking at any of the faces still watching her. The night air was warm and humid, thick with the smell of cut grass and something sweeter underneath. Honeysuckle maybe, or jasmine. Simone walked to her car, unlocked it, sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. In the booth by the window, two women were talking. One of them, silver hair piled high, red fingernails catching the light, gestured toward the parking lot where Simone sat. She could not hear the words. She did not need to. The next morning came too early. 5 a.m. Gray light through curtains that did not quite close. Simone dressed in jeans and a plain blouse, clothes that would blend into any rural landscape. She skipped the complimentary breakfast, instant coffee and stale donuts in the motel office, and drove east toward County Road 12. The land changed as she drove. Strip of commercial highway gave way to farmland. Farmland gave way to forest. Forest opened into clearings where trailers and small houses sat on plots carved from the trees, each property marked by fences or hedges or nothing at all. 247 County Road 12 was a dirt driveway leading to a white clapboard house with a wraparound porch. Simone drove past without slowing. Parked a quarter-mile down the road, where a patch of gravel widened enough to accommodate a vehicle without blocking traffic. Then she waited. 6:53 a.m. A patrol car appeared from the east, followed by a white pickup truck with a trailer attached, followed by a black sedan with tinted windows. They turned into Odessa Mabry's driveway. Simone counted to 60, then pulled her car back onto the road and followed. She parked at the edge of the property where the driveway met the county road, far enough to claim she was on public ground, close enough to see everything. The patrol car had stopped beside the house. The pickup had backed up to the porch. Two men in work clothes were already unloading moving dollies, and on the porch, a small figure in a faded house dress was trying to hold a door closed against a man in a uniform. The man in the uniform was not wearing proper gear. Simone noted this immediately. Shirt with a name embroidered above the pocket. Granger. But no badge, no department insignia, no identifying numbers. The kind of appearance that could mean private security or could mean something else entirely. She stepped out of her car. "I want to see the court order." Granger turned. He was big, 6 feet, 200 pounds, with the particular posture of someone accustomed to using size as a first argument. His eyes moved over Simone in a single sweep. Assessment, categorization, dismissal. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone with a right to be on a public road." Granger's jaw tightened. "This is a lawful guardianship transfer. Nothing here concerns you." Behind him, the elderly woman, Odessa Mabry, 82 years old, 5 feet tall, clutching a cardboard box like it contained everything she had ever owned, was being guided down the porch steps by one of the movers, not roughly, but not gently either, with the careful, impersonal handling of people who moved objects for a living and had stopped seeing the difference. "Ma'am," Simone pitched her voice to Carrie, "do you have legal representation present?" Odessa's head turned. Her eyes were rheumy with age, but sharp with fear. "They say I can't stay in my own house. They say I'm not capable." "Did anyone evaluate you? A doctor? A psychologist?" Granger stepped into Simone's sightline, blocked her view of the porch. "Lady, I'm going to ask you once. Leave now, or I'll have you arrested for interfering with a court order." "What court order? I see a transfer notice. I don't see an order." She pointed to the paper taped to the door of the pickup truck. The paper Granger had clearly assumed no one would read. Simone read it aloud. Clear, steady, loud enough for everyone present to hear. "Notice of guardianship transfer pursuant to Alabama Code Section 262A-108. Ward, Odessa Mabry. Guardian, Chambers County Probate Court. Date of order, April 14th. She paused. "That's 3 days ago. Under Section 26(2A)(102, the alleged incapacitated person must receive notice at least 14 days before any hearing." Granger's face reddened. "I don't know what book you're reading from, but Judge Meeks signed the order. That's all that matters here." "Then Judge Meeks violated state statute." The words hung in the morning air. Granger moved closer. Close enough that Simone could smell coffee on his breath, could see the broken capillaries in his nose, could feel the particular kind of heat that radiated from a man who solved problems with his fists. "You want to say that again?" Simone did not step back, did not break eye contact, did not do any of the things a civilian was supposed to do when confronted by a man with a badge, real or fake, and the weight of authority behind him. I said, "If this transfer was authorized 3 days ago and Mrs. Mabry received no prior notice, then the authorizing judge violated Alabama Code Section 26-2A-102. That's not an interpretation. That's a fact." Granger's hand moved to his belt. Not to a weapon, to the handcuffs clipped beside his radio. The sedan door opened. The man who stepped out was different from Granger in every visible way. Gray suit, red tie, polished shoes. The kind of clothes that cost more than most people in this county earned in a month. His face wore a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Good morning." He approached with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. "I'm attorney Cordell Fry, court-appointed guardian ad litem for Mrs. Mabry." He turned the smile toward Simone. "And you are?" "A witness." "To what?" "To whatever is happening here." Fry's smile flickered. Just for a moment. A glitch in the performance. Then it returned, wider than before. "What's happening here is a lawful transfer pursuant to court order. Mrs. Mabry has been determined to be incapacitated by the Chambers County Probate Court. Her property and person have been placed under court supervision for her own protection." "Was she present at that determination?" "Excuse me?" "Was Mrs. Mabry present at the hearing where she was declared incapacitated? Did she have independent counsel? Was she examined by a qualified medical professional?" Fry's eyes narrowed. The smile stayed fixed, but something behind it went cold. "Those are procedural matters that don't concern bystanders. They concern Mrs. Mabry. Mrs. Mabry is incapacitated. She's not capable of advocating for herself. That's why the court appointed me." Simone looked past him to the porch, where Odessa stood frozen between two movers. The cardboard box was still clutched to her chest. Her eyes moved between Simone and Fry like a spectator at a tennis match, unable to do anything except watch. "Mrs. Mabry," Simone raised her voice again, "do you believe you are incapacitated?" Odessa's mouth opened. Granger stepped between them. "That's enough. You're interfering with court officers in the execution of their duties. I'm placing you under arrest." "On what charge?" "Obstruction. I'm standing on a public road, asking a citizen whether she agrees with a court ruling that affects her property and liberty. If that's obstruction in Chambers County, I'd like to see the statute." Granger's face went purple. His hand closed on Simone's arm. Not the wrist, the bicep, where the grip could be passed off as guidance rather than force, but the pressure was unmistakable, hard enough to leave marks. "I'm warning you." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You do not want to make enemies here." A truck engine roared. Everyone turned. An old Ford pickup, rust on the wheel wells, cracked windshield, exhaust pipe held on with wire, skidded to a stop behind the sedan. A man jumped out before the engine died. He was young, maybe 30, tall, lean, with the particular bearing of someone who had learned to hold himself precisely. Simone noted the way his feet positioned as he moved, weight centered, shoulders square. Military training. Recent. "Grandma!" He pushed past Fry without acknowledging him, pushed past Granger without seeming to notice the bailiff's hand moving toward his taser, bounded up the porch steps and wrapped his arms around the tiny woman with the cardboard box. "Curtis, they're taking the house." "I know, Grandma, I know." Curtis Beaumont, the man who had filed the complaint 18 months ago, the complaint that had disappeared. He turned, looked at Fry, looked at Granger, looked finally at Simone, and something in his eyes shifted. Recognition, maybe, or just the acknowledgement that she was the only person present who had questioned what was happening. "You can't do this. His voice cracked. "I filed a complaint 14 months ago. Where's the investigation?" Fry stepped forward. "Mr. Beaumont, your complaint was reviewed and found to be without merit. The court's determination stands. I suggest you don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." "Difficult?" Curtis laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You're stealing my grandmother's land, the land my great-grandfather bought in 1947, paid cash. We have every deed, every tax receipt, every property record for 77 years, and you're telling me the court can just take it?" "The court is protecting your grandmother." "From what? From living in her own home? From dying on land that's been in our family for 3 generations? Granger moved toward Curtis. The taser was out now, held low at his side. "Son, I'm going to need you to step back and calm down." "Don't call me son." "Mr. Beaumont." Fry's voice had lost its smile. "If you interfere with this transfer, you will be arrested. Is that what you want?" Curtis looked at Odessa, at the cardboard box in her arms, at the movers who had paused on the porch, waiting for someone to tell them whether to continue. His shoulders dropped. "Grandma." His voice was gentle now, the rage folding inward where no one could use it against him. "We're going to fight this. I promise. But right now, I need you to go with them. I'll come visit you tonight." Odessa's chin trembled. "This is my house, Curtis. Your granddaddy built this porch with his own hands." "I know. I don't want to leave." "I know, Grandma. I know." Granger escorted Odessa to the patrol car. Not roughly. Even he seemed to sense that visible mistreatment of an 82-year-old woman might create complications. But not gently either. Professional indifference. The handling of cargo. Fry turned to Simone. "I don't know who you are or why you're here." The smile was gone entirely now. "But you witnessed a lawful guardianship transfer, which makes you a material witness. I'm issuing a subpoena. You'll appear at the courthouse tomorrow at 9 a.m. He pulled a paper from his jacket. Pre-printed, Simone noticed. Ready to go, as if he had anticipated this moment. She took it. "If I don't appear?" "Then you'll be held in contempt and arrested. Judge Meeks doesn't look kindly on people who waste the court's time." Fry straightened his tie. "I'd recommend a more cooperative attitude tomorrow, Miss Aldridge. Simone Aldridge." "Miss Aldridge." Fry nodded once, dismissively. "The courthouse opens at 8:30. Don't be late." The sedan backed down the driveway. The patrol car followed, Odessa's small figure visible through the rear window. The movers resumed their work, carrying furniture and boxes from the house to the trailer with mechanical efficiency. Curtis stood on the porch, watching everything he had tried to protect disappear piece by piece. Simone walked to her car, opened the door, paused. "Mr. Beaumont?" He looked up, eyes red, jaw tight. "Your complaint. The one you filed 14 months ago. Do you still have a copy?" A long pause. Then, "I have copies of everything. Keep them safe." She got in her car, drove away before he could ask any questions she was not ready to answer. The motel room was exactly as she had left it. Simone locked the door, checked the window, secure, pulled out her phone and opened the encrypted messaging app that connected her to the Attorney General's office. 3 messages from Ray Hollins. First, sent at 7:15 a.m. Check-in overdue. Status. Second, sent at 8:42 a.m. Simone, respond. Third, sent at 10:17 a.m. If no response by noon, Protocol 7 activates. Confirm receipt immediately. Simone typed, "On site. Witnessed guardianship transfer this morning. Subpoenaed as material witness, appearing tomorrow 9 a.m. Do not activate protocol. I need 72 more hours minimum." Sent. The response came in 43 seconds. "Understood. Be careful. These people don't play fair." Simone set the phone down, closed her eyes. 73 families. 14 months of investigation. 3 days in this county, and she had already been subpoenaed to testify in front of the very judge she was investigating. Not how she had planned this, but maybe, she thought, it was exactly what she needed. A knock on the door. Simone froze. Checked her watch. 12:17 p.m. Too early for housekeeping, which had been told she did not need service. Too obvious for anyone who wanted to catch her off guard. She moved to the side of the door. "Who is it?" "Curtis Beaumont." Simone released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Opened the door. Curtis stood in the parking lot, hands shoved in the pockets of his jeans. His eyes were bloodshot. His truck was parked 2 spaces away, engine still ticking as it cooled. "How did you find me?" "Small town," he tried to smile. It came out like a grimace. "Only one motel, only one stranger in town. Everybody knows everything." "That's not comforting." "Wasn't meant to be." He glanced over his shoulder. At the road, the trees, the nothing beyond. "Can I come in?" Simone hesitated. Procedure said no. Common sense said no. But Curtis Beaumont had filed a complaint that had been buried. Curtis Beaumont had watched his grandmother be taken from her home. Curtis Beaumont was the only person in Chambers County who had tried to fight the system. And lost. 5 minutes. She stepped aside. Curtis entered, and she closed the door behind him. "I wanted to thank you." He stood in the center of the room, too tall for the low ceiling, too big for the small space. "For this morning, for saying something. Nobody ever says anything here." "I asked questions. That's not the same as helping." "It is here." Curtis looked at her, really looked, with the particular intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "You quoted the statute, section 26(2)(a)(102). Most lawyers don't know that off the top of their heads. Who are you?" "I told you, Simone Aldridge." "That's a name, not an answer." Midway through, and the story's only getting more intense. If you haven't already, now's the perfect time to subscribe. Part 2 reveals what this quiet stranger is really capable of. Simone sat on the edge of the bed, gestured for Curtis to take the single chair. "I'm a consultant," she said. "I travel, I observe. Sometimes I find things that interest me." "And what interested you about my grandmother's eviction?" "The pattern." Curtis went still. "What pattern?" 73 guardianship cases in 6 years, all signed by the same judge, all involving black landowners over 70 years old, all resulting in property transfers to the same buyer. Simone watched his face. "You knew about this. That's why you filed your complaint." "I knew about my grandmother's case. I didn't know—" He trailed off. 73? "That I've found so far." Curtis sank into the chair. His hands hung between his knees, limp, like all the fight had drained out of them. "My grandmother kept records. Every family she heard about, every piece of land that got sold. She said someone would come asking someday." He looked up. "Are you that someone?" "I might be." "Then you should have this." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded envelope, thick with papers, placed it on the bed beside Simone. "Grandma gave this to me before they took her, said to give it to anyone who asked the right questions." He paused. "You asked the right questions." Simone opened the envelope. Inside, handwritten pages, photocopied documents, newspaper clippings. A list of names, 73 names, she counted, with addresses and dates beside each one. A photocopy of a warranty deed dated August 14, 1947. An email printout with half the text blacked out, but the visible portion clear enough. HM, approved expedited processing. Where did she get this? The email? Found it in the courthouse trash. She used to clean there before they decided she wasn't capable of living alone. Curtis's voice cracked again. Funny how that works. Capable enough to scrub their floors, but not capable enough to keep her own land. Simone spread the documents across the bed. Read slowly, carefully, the way she had read 1,000 files in 1,000 cases, the way she had been trained to see patterns in chaos. H.M. Harlan Meeks. "Mr. Beaumont," she looked up. "Your grandmother's case isn't going away. Neither are the other 72, but I can't tell you more than that right now." "Why not?" "Because I don't know who's listening." Curtis stood, moved to the window, looked out at the parking lot, the road, the sky that was starting to darken with afternoon clouds. "In 1947, my great-grandfather came back from the war. He'd served in Europe, saved up his pay for 4 years, walked into the county recorder's office with cash in his pocket, and bought 12 acres of land that used to belong to the Crawford plantation." He turned to face Simone. "Do you know what they told him?" "No." "They said he couldn't buy it, said there were covenants, restrictions, words that meant the same thing as always, not for your kind, but he had the cash, and the law was the law even back then, so they took his money, filed the deed, and my family has been paying taxes on that land ever since." Curtis walked to the door, opened it, paused on the threshold. 77 years, Miss Aldridge. That's how long my family held on to what was ours. And 3 days ago, a judge I've never met signed a piece of paper and gave it all away." He left without saying goodbye. Simone sat in the silence of the motel room, surrounded by documents that told a story of systematic theft, and began to plan. Morning came gray and humid. Simone dressed carefully. The navy suit she had brought from Montgomery, professional, unremarkable, the uniform of a woman who wanted to be taken seriously, but not noticed. She checked her appearance in the bathroom mirror, smoothed her hair, straightened her collar. The woman who looked back at her was exactly what she needed to be. A witness with nothing to hide. The courthouse was busier than she expected. By 8:45, the parking lot was half full. Pickup trucks and sedans and minivans crowded into spaces designed for a different era. People streamed through the front door, some in work clothes, some in Sunday best, all with the particular expression of citizens who had been summoned and did not know why. Simone joined the flow. The security checkpoint was manned by a single officer. Not Granger, she noted, but a younger man with a bored expression and a metal detector wand that he waved over each person with perfunctory indifference. He did not check bags, did not ask for identification, simply waved people through in a rhythm that suggested he had been doing this for years and had stopped caring long ago. The main courtroom was on the 2nd floor. Simone climbed the stairs behind a woman with 2 children clinging to her hands, found the door marked Probate Court, Judge Harlan Meeks, entered. The room was smaller than she expected. Wooden benches worn smooth by decades of use, high windows that let in filtered light, a judge's bench elevated on a platform that made whoever sat behind it seem larger than life. American flag in the corner, Alabama state flag beside it. The gallery was already filling. Simone chose a seat in the back row, watched as people filtered in, families, lawyers, curious onlookers. Watched as the court clerk, a woman with silver hair and red fingernails that Simone recognized from the diner, settled behind her desk and began shuffling papers. The woman glanced at Simone, held her gaze for a moment too long, then turned away with a smile that said, "We know who you are." At 9 a.m. precisely, the bailiff, Granger, in full uniform now, badge gleaming, stepped through a side door. "All rise. The probate court of Chambers County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Harlan Meeks presiding." The side door opened again. Judge Harlan Meeks was 64 years old, silver-haired, square-jawed, with the bearing of a man who had never been told he was wrong. His robe flowed behind him as he climbed to the bench. His eyes swept the courtroom with the particular proprietary attention of someone surveying his kingdom. They paused on Simone, lingered, moved on. "Be seated." The gallery sat. Meeks arranged papers on his bench, adjusted his glasses, took his time. The performance of a man who controlled the schedule and wanted everyone to know it. First matter. In re. Guardianship of Odessa Mabry, case number GC 240417. Is the witness present? Simone stood. Every head in the courtroom turned. "State your name for the record." "Simone Aldridge." "Occupation?" The moment stretched. Simone felt the weight of it, the decision that would shape everything that came after. Tell the truth now, and her cover was blown. Continue the deception, and she could observe more, document more, build the case that would bring this man down. Consultant. Meeks raised an eyebrow. Consultant. In what field? Various fields, primarily organizational assessment. And what brings an organizational consultant to Chambers County? I was passing through, stopped at the wrong place at the wrong time. A ripple of amusement passed through the gallery. Meeks did not smile. You witnessed the transfer of Mrs. Mabry from her residence to county care, is that correct? I witnessed individuals removing an elderly woman from her home. That's not what I asked. It's what I observed. Meeks leaned forward. The movement was slow, deliberate, designed to maximize the sense of authority pressing down on whoever stood before him. Ms. Aldridge, you are in my courtroom, giving testimony under oath. I suggest you answer the questions as asked, not as you prefer to interpret them. Simone did not look away, did not shift her weight, did not do any of the small, submissive gestures that witnesses usually offered to placate hostile judges. I observed an elderly woman being removed from a residence. I observed a notice posted on a vehicle citing Section 26(2)(a)(108). I observed that the notice was dated 3 days before the transfer, which appears to violate the 14-day notification requirement under Section 26(2)(a)(102). The courtroom went silent. Meeks's face darkened, the particular flush of a man who had just been contradicted in his own domain. You are not here to interpret the law, Ms. Aldridge. I'm not interpreting, Your Honor. I'm reading. The dates are on the posted notice. The 14-day requirement is in the statute. The discrepancy is arithmetic. Cordell Fry stood from the prosecution table. Your Honor, I move to strike the witness's testimony as non-responsive and prejudicial. The witness was asked what she observed. She observed dates. She observed a statute citation. She observed a mathematical discrepancy. Simone kept her voice level. If stating facts is prejudicial, I'm curious what that says about the facts. Granger moved from his position near the door. Simone tracked the movement without turning her head, noted his hand dropping toward the cuffs on his belt, noted the angle of his approach from behind, where she would have to turn fully to see him. Your Honor. Fry's voice carried a new urgency. This witness is clearly hostile and is attempting to obstruct these proceedings. I request that she be removed and held for contempt. Meeks nodded slowly, the gesture of a man who had already made his decision and was simply performing deliberation. Ms. Aldridge, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Withdraw your characterization of this court's procedures and confine your testimony to what you observed without editorial commentary. Your Honor, I've confined my testimony to dates and statute numbers. Those are not editorial. Those are facts. Facts are what this court determines them to be. The words hung in the air. Simone heard them, recorded them, filed them away with all the other evidence she had gathered in 72 hours in Chambers County. I understand your position, Your Honor. I maintain my testimony. Meeks's gavel cracked against the bench. I find the witness in contempt of court. Bailiff, remove her. Granger moved. His hand closed on Simone's upper arm, not the wrist, where the grip would be visible, but the soft flesh of the bicep where pressure could be applied without leaving obvious marks. He squeezed, twisted, applied exactly enough force to communicate what would happen if she resisted. Simone did not resist. Your Honor? Her voice remained steady as Granger began pulling her toward the side door. I request that the bailiff's use of force be noted in the record. The clerk, Nadine, silver hair, red fingernails, looked up from her keyboard. Her fingers paused. Meeks waved a hand. The record will reflect that the witness was removed without incident. The record will reflect an inaccuracy then, The bailiff is applying pressure to my upper arm at approximately 60 psi. This will leave bruising within 24 hours. Granger's grip tightened. Simone met Meeks's eyes. Did not flinch. Did not look away. Your Honor, I would like that discrepancy between reality and record to be noted by all present. Granger yanked. The movement was sudden enough to unbalance Simone, to send her stumbling toward the side door. Her shoulder caught the door frame, hard, and she felt the impact radiate through her collarbone. The side door slammed behind her. Granger shoved her against the wall of the hallway. His forearm pressed against her throat, not hard enough to choke, but hard enough to make breathing difficult. His face was inches from hers, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, the sweat on his skin. You think you're clever. His voice was a whisper. You think you can come into this county and make trouble, but you don't know how things work here. Simone did not struggle, did not plead, looked directly into his eyes. I know exactly how things work here. Granger's forearm pressed harder. You're going to sit in a cell until Judge Meeks decides what to do with you. Could be hours, could be days, could be until you learn some respect. He released her suddenly, grabbed her wrist, twisted her arm behind her back, and began walking her toward a stairwell marked basement. Authorized personnel only. The cells were in the basement. Simone counted the steps as they descended. 23 stairs, 1 landing, a corridor that smelled like mildew and disinfectant. 3 doors, all closed, a single fluorescent light that flickered every 4 seconds. Granger opened the 3rd door. The room inside was small, 8 feet by 8 feet, maybe less. A metal bench bolted to the wall, a toilet with no seat, a camera in the corner, lens pointed at the ceiling instead of the room. Sit. Simone sat. Granger closed the door. The lock clicked twice, mechanical, then electronic. The sound of finality. She was alone. Time moved differently in holding. No windows, no clock, just the fluorescent flicker and the distant sound of the courthouse going about its business overhead. Simone sat on the metal bench, hands folded in her lap, back straight, eyes closed. 1 hour passed, maybe 2. She measured time by the rhythm of her breathing, by the ache spreading through her shoulder where it had hit the doorframe, by the bruise she could feel forming on her upper arm where Granger had gripped. The door opened. She did not move, did not open her eyes, waited. Ms. Aldridge. The voice was familiar, smooth, confident, with the particular cadence of someone who had learned to sell things. Simone opened her eyes. Preston Vance stood in the doorway. He was dressed differently than at the eviction. No suit jacket, sleeves rolled up, the appearance of a man who had come from important business and could only spare a few minutes. His smile was fixed in place like a mask. I hope you're comfortable. Define comfortable. Vance entered the cell. Did not close the door. A calculated gesture, suggesting that this was a friendly visit, not an interrogation. He leaned against the wall opposite Simone, arms crossed, expression pleasant. I'm not here in any official capacity, just a concerned citizen who hates to see misunderstandings escalate. Contempt of court isn't a misunderstanding. It doesn't have to be a finding at all. Vance's smile widened. Judge Meeks is a reasonable man. If you're willing to clarify your testimony, acknowledge that you may have misinterpreted what you saw, that the dates on the notice were perhaps confusing, this whole thing goes away. You drive home, forget about Chambers County, and we all move on. Simone studied him. The expensive watch, the manicured nails, the tan that suggested time spent on golf courses rather than in offices. And if I don't clarify? Vance's smile flickered. Then the judge may decide your contempt extends to other matters. Your vehicle, for instance. Impound fees add up quickly. And if something unfortunate happened to your personal effects during a routine search. He spread his hands. These things happen in small counties. You're threatening to steal from me. I'm explaining consequences. Vance pushed off the wall, moved closer, close enough that Simone had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You're not from here. You don't understand how things work. In Chambers County, we take care of our own. And you," he leaned down, voice dropping to a murmur, "are very clearly not one of us." Simone held his gaze. "I understand exactly what you're offering. I decline." Vance straightened. The smile remained, but something behind it went cold. "Your choice. But choices have consequences." He walked to the door, paused on the threshold. "Think about it, Ms. Aldridge. You have time." The door closed. The lock clicked. Simone was alone again. 3 more hours. She marked them by the flickering light, by the ache in her shoulder, by the numbness spreading through her legs from the metal bench. No food, no water, no explanation. Then the lock clicked. Granger stood in the doorway. His face was blank, professionally neutral, the expression of someone following orders. "Judge says you can go. For now." He tossed her bag at her feet. The bag that had been in her car. The bag that Vance had threatened to search. Simone picked it up. Checked the contents. Wallet, phone, keys. Everything present. She would check more carefully later when no one was watching. "Don't leave the county." She walked past Granger without acknowledging him. Up the stairs, through the courthouse lobby, out into late afternoon sunlight that seemed too bright after hours in fluorescent dimness. Her car was where she had left it. She drove to the motel, locked the door, checked every pocket of her bag, every fold of her wallet, every crevice of her phone case. Nothing missing. Nothing added. Either Vance had been bluffing, or he was waiting to see what she would do next. Simone sat on the bed, opened her phone. 2 messages from Ray Hollins. First, Chambers County PD ran your plates. They know your name and that your registration is Montgomery. Still want to hold? Second, AG is asking questions. I can buy you another 48 hours, but not more. What's your status? Simone typed, held in contempt, detained 6 hours, released. They're testing boundaries. Sent. The response came immediately. This is escalating faster than planned. Consider extraction. Simone stared at the message. Extraction meant leaving. Extraction meant taking what she had gathered. The documents from Curtis, the observations from the courtroom, the evidence of procedural violations, and building a case from the safety of Montgomery. Extraction meant abandoning Odessa Mabry, abandoning the 72 other families whose land had been stolen, abandoning the chance to see Judge Harlan Meeks face consequences in his own courtroom. She typed, negative, continuing observation, need 48 more hours. Sent. Ray's response was a single word. Careful. A knock on the door. Simone froze. Checked her watch. 6:23 p.m. Not Granger. He would not knock. Not Vance. He would send someone else. Who is it? Curtis Beaumont. Simone exhaled, opened the door. Curtis stood in the parking lot, just as he had the day before. But something was different. His eyes were brighter. His posture was straighter. He was holding a cardboard box. I heard what happened. The whole town's talking. Let me guess. I got what I deserved. Some people think that. Curtis shifted the box to his hip. Others think you're the first person who ever stood up to Meeks and walked out of his courthouse alive. That's a low bar. It's the only bar we have. He held out the box. I brought more. Simone stepped aside to let him in. The box contained papers. Dozens of them. Photocopies and originals, handwritten notes and typed documents, newspaper clippings yellowed with age. My grandmother spent years collecting this. Every case she heard about. Every family that lost their land. She kept records because she knew someday someone would need them. Simone spread the documents across the bed. Tax records, court filings, property transfers. A pattern emerging from chaos. And in the middle of it all, a single piece of paper that made her stop. A list. 73 names, written in an elderly hand. Beside each name, an address, a date, an acreage. And after each entry, the same notation. Sold to Vance Properties. Your grandmother compiled this? Over 6 years. Every time she heard about a family losing their land, she wrote it down. Names, dates, everything. Simone scanned the list, recognized some names from her own files, saw others she had not known about. At the bottom of the list, written in different ink, a final entry. Odessa Mabry, 247 County Road 12, 12 acres, April 14th. 3 days ago. Curtis. Simone looked up. I need to tell you something. I know. You don't know. I know you're not a consultant. Curtis met her eyes. I know you quoted state statute from memory. I know you stood up to Meeks like someone who's done it before. And I know the Attorney General's office has been investigating guardianship fraud in Alabama for 2 years. He paused. I read the news, Ms. Aldridge. I just didn't know they'd sent anyone here. Simone was silent for a long moment. I can't confirm or deny anything about who I work for. You don't have to. Curtis sat on the edge of the chair. Just tell me this. Is there a chance? A real chance that someone, somewhere, might hold these people accountable? Simone looked at the documents spread across the bed, at the 73 names written in Odessa Mabry's careful handwriting, at the pattern of theft that had been hiding in plain sight for 6 years. There's a chance. Curtis nodded slowly, let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for months. Then it was worth it, all of it. The complaints that went nowhere, the lawyers who wouldn't take my calls, the neighbors who stopped talking to me because I made trouble. He stood. Whatever you need, Ms. Aldridge. Whatever you need to make this stop. I'll help. Right now, I need you to get a message to your grandmother. They moved her to the county care facility, but I can get in. Tell her to hold on to any documents she still has. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. He walked to the door, paused. My grandmother always said the truth has a way of coming out, even when people try to bury it, even when it takes years. He looked back at Simone. I hope she was right. So do I. Curtis left. Simone sat alone with 73 names and the weight of everything they represented. The night passed slowly. Simone photographed every document, organized them by date, by name, by property, built a timeline that stretched back 6 years and forward into whatever came next. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. Message from Ray. Chambers County Sheriff's Department requested your driver's license info from Montgomery DMV. They're digging. Simone typed back, expected, hold the line. At 4 a.m., another message. AG authorized extension. You have 72 hours. After that, we're pulling you out whether you're ready or not. 72 hours. 3 days to document enough evidence to bring down a judge, a lawyer, a realtor, and whatever system had protected them for 6 years. Simone closed her eyes. 3 days. Morning came too soon. 6 a.m. Gray light through curtains that did not quite close. Simone dressed, packed the documents Curtis had brought, and drove to the courthouse. The parking lot was nearly empty. She parked across the street, watched the building from behind the wheel of her car, noted the lights coming on in second-floor windows. The clerk, Nadine, arriving at 7:15. Granger arriving at 7:45, moving with the swagger of a man who had never been held accountable for anything. At 8:30, another vehicle pulled into the lot. Not a pickup, not a sedan. A late-model SUV with government plates and tinted windows that reflected the morning sun like mirrors. 2 people stepped out. One was a woman in a dark suit, mid-40s, black, with the particular posture of someone who carried authority without needing to announce it. The other was a man in his 50s, white, with a briefcase that bore the seal of the Alabama Attorney General's office. Simone's phone buzzed. Message from Ray. Cavalry's early. Sorry, AG moved up the timeline. You're being extracted in 30 minutes. Simone stared at the message, then typed, Not yet. Give me 1 more hour. Ray. Simone. 1 hour. I know what I'm doing. She put the phone away, stepped out of her car, walked toward the courthouse. The woman in the dark suit saw her coming, stopped on the courthouse steps. "Ms. Aldridge." "Special Agent Holt." Dana Holt, FBI liaison, assigned to the AG's Elder Fraud Task Force. They had met twice in Montgomery, both times in secure conference rooms where the details of Operation Restoration had been laid out in classified briefings. "You were supposed to observe, not get arrested. Things escalated." "I can see that." Holt glanced at the courthouse, at the windows where faces were beginning to appear, drawn by the unusual vehicle in the lot. "The AG decided we're moving today. Judge Meeks is being notified of the investigation within the hour." "That's too soon. It's the timeline we have." Holt's expression softened slightly. "You did good work, Simone. The documents you sent last night, the list of 73 victims, that's the foundation we needed. But continuing to expose yourself serves no purpose. There's one more thing I need to do." "What?" Simone looked at the courthouse, at the windows where Nadine was watching, at the door where Granger had just appeared, hand resting on his belt. "I need to testify." "Simone," he held me in contempt for telling the truth, for reading dates off a posted notice, for stating arithmetic facts about statutory requirements. Simone met Holt's eyes. "I'm not leaving this county until I say what I came to say, in his courtroom, on his record, where he can't make it disappear." Holt studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "1 hour, then we're pulling you out regardless. That's all I need." The courtroom was fuller than the day before. Word had spread. Something was happening. People filled the gallery, families, lawyers, reporters who had driven from Montgomery when rumors began circulating on law enforcement channels. Judge Harlan Meeks entered at 9 a.m. precisely. His expression was unreadable. The smooth confidence of yesterday had been replaced by something harder, more guarded. He had seen the SUV in the parking lot, knew something was coming, but not what, not yet. "First matter," his voice was clipped. "Continuation of yesterday's proceedings regarding the witness, Simone Aldridge." Simone stood. Meeks's eyes found her, held. "Ms. Aldridge, you were held in contempt yesterday for refusing to comply with this court's directives. Before I proceed with formal sanctions, I'm giving you one final opportunity to correct your testimony." Simone walked to the witness stand, did not sit, did not wait to be invited. "Your Honor, before you proceed, I need to enter something into the record. The court has not authorized any new submissions. With respect, Your Honor, what I'm about to submit doesn't require your authorization." She reached into her jacket, pulled out a folded document, unfolded it slowly, deliberately, letting the moment stretch. "This is the moment everything changes, and you won't want to miss what happens in Part 2. Hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't already. I am entering into the record Alabama State Gazette, Volume 147, Issue 12, published March 28th of this year, page 47. She began to read. "Executive appointment. Pursuant to Alabama Code Section 36-15-1, Governor announces appointment of Simone Aldridge as State Prosecutor, Civil Rights and Elder Abuse Division, Office of the Attorney General, effective April 1st. The courtroom erupted. Reporters lunged for phones. Gallery members turned to each other with expressions of shock. Cordell Fry shot to his feet, face pale, mouth opening and closing without sound. Granger took one step toward Simone, stopped. His hand hovered over his belt, uncertain. Meeks sat frozen. The gavel hung in his hand, forgotten. His face had drained of color, the particular shade of someone watching their world collapse in real time. "I am also entering authorization for investigation, signed by the Attorney General, dated February 12th, reference number AG 240079. Simone read on. Quote, "State Prosecutor Aldridge is authorized to conduct covert observation of Chambers County probate court proceedings as part of ongoing investigation into alleged guardianship fraud, pursuant to Alabama Code Section 36-15-14. End quote. She lowered the document, looked directly at Meeks. Your Honor, for the past 14 months, the Attorney General's office has been investigating a pattern of guardianship fraud in Chambers County. 73 elderly black landowners have been declared incapacitated without proper notice, without proper hearings, without proper legal representation. 73 properties have been transferred to court supervision and sold to a single buyer at prices well below market value. The courtroom had gone silent. Not the silence of anticipation, the silence of detonation. The moment after the bomb explodes, before anyone understands what just happened. You signed all 73 orders. Attorney Fry served as guardian ad litem in all 73 cases. Preston Vance purchased all 73 properties through a company called Vance Properties, LLC. Meeks found his voice. This is entrapment. You came here under false pretenses. I came here under no pretenses, Your Honor. I stated my name. I stated I was a consultant. The court made assumptions. Simone's voice carried through the silent courtroom. That's not entrapment. That's investigation. The side door opened. Special Agent Dana Holt entered, followed by Assistant Attorney General Marcus Webb. Their badges caught the light from the high windows, glinting like small suns. Simone stepped down from the witness stand. Your Honor, I'm informing you that the FBI has opened an investigation into potential violations of 18 U.S.C. Section 1341, mail fraud, in connection with property transfers in Chambers County. Additionally, the Alabama Judicial Qualifications Commission has been notified of this investigation and will conduct its own review. Holt stepped forward. Judge Meeks, you are advised to retain legal counsel. This court is suspended pending investigation by the Judicial Qualifications Commission. Pursuant to Canon 3 of the Alabama Canons of Judicial Ethics, you are relieved of judicial duties effective immediately. Meeks stood. For a moment he seemed about to argue, about to shout, about to do any of the things that powerful men do when their power is stripped away. Then his shoulders dropped. The gavel slipped from his fingers, hit the bench with a wooden crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. This isn't over. His voice was barely a whisper. No, Simone agreed. It's just beginning. The aftermath was chaos. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. FBI agents began securing documents from the clerk's office. State bar investigators arrived to take statements from Cordell Fry, who had already stopped answering questions on advice of counsel he had frantically called. Preston Vance was nowhere to be found. Granger stood by the courthouse entrance, stripped of his position, watching everything he had protected for years collapse around him. When Simone walked past, he did not speak, did not move, just looked at her with the particular expression of a man who had finally met someone he could not intimidate. Curtis Beaumont found her in the parking lot. Is it true? His voice cracked. Is it really over? Not over. Simone looked at the courthouse, at the FBI vehicles, at the crowd still gathering. This is just the beginning. Grand jury, indictments, civil suits. Your grandmother's case will have to be reviewed. All 73 cases will have to be reviewed. It's going to take months, maybe years. But it's happening. It's happening. Curtis wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. My grandmother, can I tell her? You can tell her, but tell her to hold on to those documents. We're going to need them. Yes, ma'am. He walked away. Simone watched him go. A man who had fought for 14 months and finally, had something to show for it. Her phone buzzed. Message from Ray. Nice work. AG wants a debrief in Montgomery tomorrow. Oh, and local news is running the story in 30 minutes. You might want to avoid cameras. Simone smiled. Too late for that. 2 hours later, Simone stood in the county care facility where Odessa Mabry had been placed. The old woman sat in a plastic chair by the window, looking out at a parking lot that was not her land, at buildings that were not her home, at a world that had tried to erase everything she had spent 77 years protecting. Mrs. Mabry. Odessa turned. Her eyes were clear, alert. Nothing about her suggested the incapacity that Judge Meeks had certified 3 days ago. "You're the woman from the eviction, the one who asked questions." "Yes, ma'am." "Curtis said you're some kind of prosecutor." "State prosecutor, Civil Rights and Elder Abuse Division." Odessa studied her for a long moment. "You got Meeks?" "He's been suspended. There's going to be an investigation, grand jury, probably indictments." "Probably," Odessa's voice was flat. "In my experience, probably doesn't mean much when it comes to people like him." Simone sat in the chair beside her. "Mrs. Mabry, I can't promise you your land back. I can't promise Meeks will go to prison. I can't promise anything except this. We're going to try. We're going to investigate every case he ever touched. We're going to document every property that was stolen. And we're going to give you and 72 other families the chance to tell your stories in a court where someone is actually listening." Odessa was quiet. Then she reached into the pocket of her house dress, pulled out a folded piece of paper, handed it to Simone. "My daddy bought that land in 1947, paid cash he saved for 4 years while he was fighting in Europe. He always said the land was the only thing they couldn't take from us." She paused. "I guess he was wrong." Simone unfolded the paper. A warranty deed. Chambers County, Alabama, August 14, 1947. Grantor, Elijah Tucker. Grantee, Isaiah Mabry. 77 years of history, folded into a single piece of paper. Mrs. Mabry. Simone folded the deed carefully, handed it back. "Hold on to this. Don't let anyone tell you it doesn't matter." Odessa took the paper, looked at it, looked at Simone. "Thank you for asking questions, even when they didn't want to hear them. That's my job." "No," Odessa shook her head slowly. "Your job is investigating fraud. Asking questions when nobody wants to hear them, that's something else." She turned back to the window. Simone left without saying goodbye. Some conversations did not need endings. That night, Simone drove back to Montgomery. 3 hours through darkness, headlights cutting through Alabama countryside that looked different now. Not hostile, not threatening, just land. Land that had been fought over and stolen and reclaimed and stolen again for generations. Her phone buzzed as she crossed the county line. Message from Ray. "Local news ran the story. National pickup starting. Meeks's lawyer issued a statement denying everything." Simone typed back. "Expected." Ray. "AG wants to know if you're okay." Simone looked at the bruise forming on her upper arm, at the ache in her shoulder, at the face in her rearview mirror that looked older than it had 3 days ago. "I'm fine." Ray. "You don't have to be." Simone set the phone down, kept driving. The lights of Montgomery appeared on the horizon. Office buildings and street lamps and the particular glow of a city that was still awake, still working, still grinding through the machinery of justice that moved too slowly and accomplished too little. But sometimes, rarely, imperfectly, against all odds, accomplished something. She thought about Odessa Mabry sitting in a plastic chair holding a deed that represented 77 years of hope. She thought about Curtis Beaumont, who had fought for 14 months and never stopped believing. She thought about 73 families whose stories were finally going to be heard. And she thought about Judge Harlan Meeks, suspended from his bench, watching 22 years of unchallenged authority collapse in less than 22 minutes. Not justice. Not yet. But a beginning. Simone pulled into the parking garage beneath the Justice Building, cut the engine, sat in the darkness for a long moment. Then she gathered her files, her documents, her evidence, and went upstairs to continue the work. The conference room on the 6th floor of the Alabama Justice Building smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Simone had been there since 6 a.m., 3 days after the courthouse revelation. Files covered every inch of the mahogany table. 73 case folders, each representing a family, a property, a life dismantled by judicial signature. The door opened. Investigator Ray Hollins entered with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that suggested sleep had become a distant memory. Media's camped outside, 12 outlets now. CNN sent a crew from Atlanta. Let them wait. AG wants a press conference by noon. The AG can wait too. Simone did not look up from the document she was reading. We have 72 hours before Meeks's lawyers file their first motion. I want every piece of evidence cataloged and authenticated before they start trying to suppress. Ray set the coffee down, pulled a chair to the table. We have a problem. Now Simone looked up. The body cam footage from the Mabry eviction. Granger's camera. What about it? 12 minutes missing. 7:11 to 7:23 a.m. It traced the deletion to a county server access point, but the user credentials were generic. Could have been anyone with administrative privileges. Simone set down her pen. 12 minutes. The exact window when Odessa Mabry had been removed from her home. The exact window when Granger had threatened Curtis Beaumont. The exact window when whatever had happened inside that house, whatever they did not want anyone to see, had occurred. Who has administrative access to county servers? Sheriff's Department IT, County Clerk's Office, and, Ray paused, the probate court. Nadine Ashworth. Her login was used to access the server at 9:47 p.m. on April 14th, 6 hours after the eviction. Simone stood, walked to the window. Montgomery spread below her, government buildings, parking lots, the particular geometry of a state capitol that existed to administer power. She deleted the footage. We can't prove it was her personally, just her credentials. She'll claim they were stolen, shared, compromised. Then we find another way. The door opened again. Special Agent Dana Holt entered without knocking. Her face carried the particular tension of someone bearing news they did not want to deliver. We have a bigger problem. The federal courthouse in Birmingham was 2 hours from Montgomery. Simone made the drive in silence, Ray beside her, neither speaking. The radio stayed off. The only sound was tires on asphalt and the occasional ping of Simone's phone receiving updates she did not check. Judge Harlan Meeks had filed an emergency motion. Not in Alabama State Court. In federal court. His attorneys had invoked constitutional protections, claimed the investigation violated due process, demanded immediate injunctive relief to prevent what they called a politically motivated witch hunt designed to destroy a distinguished jurist's reputation. The motion had been assigned to Judge William Thornton. Simone knew the name. Everyone in Alabama legal circles knew the name. Thornton was 71 years old, appointed by a president who had been dead for 15 years, and possessed the particular judicial philosophy that viewed any challenge to established authority as an attack on civilization itself. The hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. They arrived at 1:30. The federal courthouse was a monument to granite and marble, designed to make everyone who entered feel small. Simone walked through security, past the metal detectors and X-ray machines, into a lobby that echoed with footsteps and whispered conversations. Meeks's legal team was already there. 4 attorneys in suits that cost more than most families earned in a month. They stood in a cluster near the elevator bank, speaking in low voices, occasionally glancing toward Simone with the particular expression of predators sizing up prey. Prosecutor Aldridge. The voice came from behind her. Simone turned. The man approaching was tall, silver-haired, with the practiced smile of someone who had spent decades winning cases through charm as much as competence. His name was Harrison Blake, and he was the most expensive defense attorney in Alabama. Mr. Blake, I wanted to introduce myself before we begin. Professional courtesy. His smile widened. I'm representing Judge Meeks in this matter. I'm aware. Then you're also aware that this investigation is built on questionable foundations. A prosecutor conducting undercover surveillance without proper authorization, evidence gathered through deception, constitutional violations at every turn. Simone met his gaze without blinking. The authorization was signed by the Attorney General. The surveillance was conducted within legal parameters, and the only constitutional violations I've documented were committed by your client. Blake's smile did not waver. "We'll let the court decide that." He glanced at his watch. "See you inside, prosecutor." He walked away. His team fell into formation behind him, a phalanx of expensive suits and confident expressions. Ray moved closer to Simone. "He's going to argue the whole investigation is fruit of the poisonous tree. If Thornton agrees—" "He won't." "How do you know?" Simone did not answer. She was watching Blake's team enter the elevator, watching the doors close, watching the numbers climb toward the courtroom where everything she had built over 14 months would be tested. Because the evidence speaks for itself. If you're watching a story about fighting corruption in the courts, you're in the right place. Subscribe now. The courtroom battle you're about to see will show you exactly how the system protects its own. Courtroom 4B was smaller than Simone expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, the particular institutional blandness of a space designed for function rather than inspiration. The gallery held perhaps 40 seats, most already filled with reporters and observers who had driven from across the state to witness what the morning news was calling the most significant judicial corruption case in Alabama history. Judge William Thornton entered at precisely 2 p.m. He was smaller in person than his reputation suggested. 5'7", slight build, with wire-rimmed glasses that made his eyes look larger than they were. But when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 40 years on the federal bench. "This is a hearing on the defendant's motion for emergency injunctive relief. Mr. Blake, you may proceed." Blake stood, buttoned his jacket, approached the podium with the easy confidence of a man who had done this 1,000 times. "Your Honor, my client, Judge Harlan Meeks, has served the people of Chambers County for 22 years. In that time, he has presided over thousands of cases with distinction and integrity. His record is exemplary. His reputation is beyond reproach." He paused for effect. "Until 3 days ago, when a state prosecutor, acting without proper oversight, without proper authorization, and without proper regard for constitutional protections, conducted an undercover operation designed to entrap and destroy him." Simone kept her expression neutral. This was the expected strategy: attack the investigation, not the evidence. Make the prosecutor the villain. Hope the judge would be sympathetic to a fellow member of the judicial fraternity. The evidence gathered in this so-called investigation is tainted from its inception. Prosecutor Aldridge entered Chambers County under false pretenses. She witnessed a lawful court proceeding and deliberately mischaracterized what she observed. She was held in contempt for refusing to comply with lawful court orders, contempt that she now claims was retaliation. Blake turned to face Simone directly. "This is not justice, Your Honor. This is persecution. And we ask this court to enjoin any further investigation until proper constitutional safeguards can be established." Thornton nodded slowly. "Ms. Aldridge, response?" Simone stood. The courtroom seemed to contract around her, walls pressing inward, ceiling lowering, every eye fixed on the woman who had dared to challenge a 22-year judge in his own territory. "Your Honor, the defendant's motion rests on a fundamental mischaracterization of the facts." She walked to the podium, did not bring notes, did not need them. "I entered Chambers County pursuant to a lawful investigation authorized by the Alabama Attorney General. That authorization, which I've submitted as Exhibit A, specifically permits covert observation of court proceedings suspected of involving fraud." "Suspected," Blake interjected without standing. "Suspected based on what evidence?" "Mr. Blake, you'll have your opportunity to respond." Thornton's voice was sharp. "Continue, Miss Aldridge." "The investigation was initiated 14 months ago based on a pattern identified in guardianship filings. 73 cases over 6 years, all involving elderly black landowners, all resulting in property transfers to a single buyer, all presided over by Judge Meeks, with Attorney Cordell Fry serving as guardian ad litem." Simone pulled a document from her folder. "I'm submitting as Exhibit B a statistical analysis conducted by the Attorney General's office. The probability of this pattern occurring by chance is less than 1 in 400 million. Thornton leaned forward. 1 in 400 million? Yes, Your Honor. The analysis controlled for demographic factors, property values, and guardianship rates across comparable Alabama counties. The concentration of cases involving black landowners in Chambers County is 17 standard deviations above the expected mean. Blake was on his feet. Objection. This statistical analysis was never disclosed to the defense. We've had no opportunity to review the methodology. The analysis was completed yesterday, Your Honor. We're prepared to provide full documentation to defense counsel, but the underlying data, the 73 case files, have been public record for 6 years. The defendant's own court generated this evidence. Thornton held up a hand. I'll allow the exhibit subject to defense review. Continue, Ms. Aldridge. Simone nodded. Your Honor, the defendant claims I acted without proper authorization. The authorization document speaks for itself. The defendant claims I mischaracterized what I observed. The posted notice I read aloud, which cited Section 26 to 2A 108 and was dated 3 days before the transfer, is a matter of public record. The 14-day notice requirement under Section 26 2A 102 is black-letter law. She paused. The defendant was held in contempt not for lying, not for obstructing, but for reading dates off a document and stating arithmetic facts about statutory requirements. If that constitutes grounds for contempt in Chambers County, then Chambers County has a very different understanding of justice than the rest of Alabama. The gallery stirred. Someone coughed. A reporter's pen scratched across paper. Thornton removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly with a handkerchief. Put them back on, Mr. Blake. I've read your motion. I've heard your argument. And I'm troubled by several aspects of this case. Blake's expression flickered. However, Thornton continued, I'm also troubled by the prospect of enjoining a state investigation into potential fraud affecting 73 families. The constitutional issues you've raised are not frivolous, but neither are they sufficient to warrant emergency relief at this stage. Your Honor, I'm denying the motion for injunctive relief. Thornton's gavel cracked against the bench. The investigation may proceed. The defendant's constitutional arguments may be raised in any subsequent prosecution, where they will receive full consideration. But this court will not shut down an investigation into systematic property theft based on procedural objections to how the investigation began. Simone exhaled. However, Thornton fixed her with a gaze that carried decades of judicial authority. Ms. Aldridge, I expect this investigation to be conducted with scrupulous attention to constitutional requirements. Any evidence gathered improperly will be excluded. Any witnesses coerced will be dismissed. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor. Good. Thornton stood. We're adjourned. The drive back to Montgomery felt shorter than the drive up. Ray was on the phone for most of it, coordinating with the investigative team, fielding calls from the AG's office, managing the cascade of tasks that a successful hearing generated. Simone drove in silence. The victory was real but incomplete. Thornton had denied the injunction, but his warning had been clear. One misstep, one procedural error, one piece of improperly gathered evidence, and the entire case could collapse. Meeks knew this. Blake knew this. And somewhere in Chambers County, the people who had built this system over 6 years were already planning their next move. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she did not recognize. You should have taken the deal. Simone stared at the message. What is it? Ray asked, ending her call. Preston Vance, or someone working for him. How do you know? Because he offered me a deal in that holding cell. Walk away, forget what I saw, and everything goes away. Simone set the phone down. He's reminding me that the offer is no longer on the table. Should I trace the number? It'll be a burner, disposable, untraceable. Then what do we do? Simone looked at the road ahead. At the highway stretching toward Montgomery, toward the Justice Building, toward 73 case files that represented 73 families waiting for justice. We do our jobs. We build the case. And we make sure that when this goes to trial, the evidence is so overwhelming that no procedural objection, no constitutional argument, no expensive defense attorney can make it disappear. The next 3 weeks were a blur of depositions, document reviews, and sleepless nights. Simone's team expanded from 3 investigators to 12. The FBI assigned a forensic accountant to trace the money flowing through Vance Properties LLC. The State Bar opened a parallel investigation into Cordell Fry's conduct as guardian ad litem. And slowly, painfully, the pieces began to fit together. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Nadine Ashworth, the court clerk, identified targets: elderly black landowners with valuable property and limited family support. She passed names to Cordell Fry, who filed guardianship petitions citing vague concerns about diminished capacity. Judge Meeks signed the orders without hearings, without notice, without any of the procedural protections that Alabama law required. Once guardianship was established, Fry, as court-appointed guardian, authorized the sale of property to Vance Properties LLC. The sales were always below market value, always processed quickly, always approved by Meeks without scrutiny. The money disappeared into a web of shell companies and offshore accounts. Simone traced over $4 million in property transfers over 6 years. $4 million stolen from families who had held their land for generations. But tracing money was not the same as proving criminal intent. Meeks could claim he trusted Fry's recommendations. Fry could claim he acted in the ward's best interests. Vance could claim he simply bought properties that were legally for sale. She needed more. She needed someone to break. The call came at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. Simone was in her office, surrounded by files, running on caffeine and determination. Her phone buzzed with a number she recognized: the Chambers County area code. Aldridge. Ms. Aldridge, this is Nadine Ashworth. Simone sat up straight. Ms. Ashworth, I'm surprised to hear from you. I imagine you are. The voice on the other end was different from what Simone remembered. Smaller, older, stripped of the confident malice that had characterized her courtroom demeanor. I need to talk to you, in person, tonight. About what? A long pause. About what really happened in Chambers County. About things that weren't in any of the files you've been reading. Simone's heart rate spiked. Where? There's a rest stop on I-85, mile marker 47. I'll be there at midnight. Come alone. The line went dead. Simone stared at the phone. This could be a trap. Nadine Ashworth had been part of the conspiracy from the beginning. The gatekeeper who identified victims, the clerk who falsified records, the loyalist who had watched Simone be dragged from the courtroom without lifting a finger. But she had also been the one with access to everything, the one who knew where the bodies were buried. If she was willing to talk. Simone grabbed her jacket. The rest stop was empty except for a single car. Gray sedan, Alabama plates, parked under the only working light in a lot designed for 18-wheelers. Simone pulled in 3 spaces away, cut her engine, waited. The sedan's door opened. Nadine Ashworth emerged slowly, like a woman carrying weight that had finally become too heavy. She was wearing civilian clothes, jeans, a plain blouse, nothing like the professional attire Simone had seen in the courthouse. Her silver hair was loose, falling around a face that looked 10 years older than it had 3 weeks ago. Simone stepped out of her car. Ms. Ashworth? Don't call me that. Nadine's voice cracked. Don't call me anything. Just listen. They stood in the pool of light, 2 women on opposite sides of a chasm that 3 weeks of investigation had carved between them. I didn't know. Nadine's hands twisted together. When it started, I didn't know what they were doing. Meeks said we were helping people. Said these old folks couldn't take care of themselves, couldn't manage their property, needed protection. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. Nadine laughed, a harsh, broken sound. I'd worked for that man for 18 years. He was the most respected judge in the county. Everyone trusted him. Everyone. Simone said nothing. Let the silence do its work. The first few cases, I didn't see anything wrong. Paperwork looked normal. Orders looked legitimate. But then, Nadine's voice dropped. Then I started noticing patterns. Same guardian every time. Same buyer for every property. Same families. Always black, always old, always with land that someone wanted. When did you realize what was happening? 3 years ago, maybe 4. I saw an email I wasn't supposed to see. Vance to Meeks, talking about the next batch of candidates. Candidates. She spat the word, like they were selecting cattle for slaughter. Why didn't you report it? Nadine's eyes filled with tears. Because I was part of it by then. My name was on the filings. My signature was on the certifications. If Meeks went down, I went down with him. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. And because they made sure I knew what would happen if I talked. What do you mean? Granger, the bailiff. 3 years ago, after I asked too many questions about a case, he came to my house. Middle of the night. Didn't say anything. Just stood on my porch for an hour, looking at my windows. Nadine's voice shook. I got the message. Simone felt the familiar cold anger that had driven her through 14 months of investigation. Ms. Ashworth, if you're willing to testify— I'm not here to testify. Nadine reached into her pocket, pulled out a USB drive, held it out toward Simone. I'm here to give you this. Simone took the drive. Small, black, unremarkable. What is it? Everything. Emails, financial records. The real court transcripts, not the ones Vance Tully doctored for the official record. 6 years of evidence that I copied because I knew someday someone would come asking questions. Simone stared at the drive. Why now? Why give this to me? Nadine's face crumpled. Because they're going to kill me anyway. Once they find out I talked to you, and they will find out, I'm dead. Granger, Vance, whoever they send. So I might as well make it count. We can protect you. Witness protection. You can't protect me from what's coming. Nadine stepped back toward her car. Take the drive. Use it. Make sure what they did to those families doesn't disappear into some plea deal where everyone walks away clean. She opened her car door. Ms. Ashworth. My grandmother was black, Ms. Aldridge. Nadine's voice was barely a whisper now. Did you know that? She passed for white her whole life because that was the only way to survive in this county. And I spent 18 years helping destroy families like hers because I was too scared to say no. She got in the car, started the engine. I can't undo what I did, but maybe this helps. The sedan pulled away. Taillights disappeared into the darkness. Simone stood alone in the empty parking lot, holding a USB drive that might contain everything she needed, or nothing at all. It contained everything. 472 emails spanning 6 years. Financial records showing payments from Vance Properties to accounts controlled by Meeks and Fry. Original court transcripts that documented hearings Simone had never seen. Hearings where elderly defendants begged to keep their homes, where family members pleaded for more time, where Meeks dismissed every objection with the same phrase, "The court finds the ward to be incapacitated. Next case." And the real bombshell, a document titled Acquisition Targets, 2024. A list of 12 names. 12 elderly black landowners who had not yet been declared incapacitated. 12 properties that Vance Properties had not yet acquired. 12 families who were next in line for the machine that Meeks and his conspirators had built. Simone worked through the night. By dawn, she had a new charging document drafted. Not just guardianship fraud, but conspiracy, wire fraud, civil rights violations, and what could potentially be charged under RICO statutes as an ongoing criminal enterprise. She called the AG at 7 a.m. By noon, arrest warrants had been issued. This is where it all comes crashing down. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. The arrests you're about to see are just the beginning. The arrests happened simultaneously. FBI agents served warrants in 4 locations across Alabama: Meeks's home in Chambers County, Fry's law office in Montgomery, Vance's real estate headquarters in Birmingham, and Nadine Ashworth's apartment, though by the time they arrived, she had disappeared. Simone watched the feeds from the command center in Montgomery. Meeks came out in handcuffs, silver hair disheveled, face a mask of outrage. He was still wearing his bathrobe. The morning news would run that image for weeks. The distinguished jurist, stripped of dignity, led to a waiting vehicle while neighbors watched from their porches. Fry was more composed. He said nothing, signed nothing, requested his attorney immediately. Professional to the end. Vance tried to run. He made it 3 blocks before the FBI vehicle caught up with him. The footage showed him face down on a manicured lawn, arms twisted behind his back, expensive suit grass-stained beyond repair. And in Chambers County, Hoyt Granger was nowhere to be found. The holding facility in Montgomery was designed for high-profile defendants. Simone arrived at 4 p.m., 2 hours after the arrests. She was not there to interrogate. The defendants had all lawyered up immediately. But to observe, to see, for herself, the faces of the people who had stolen $4 million from 73 families. Judge Harlan Meeks sat in an interview room, alone except for his attorney. Harrison Blake had arrived within an hour of the arrest, somehow managing to look polished and prepared despite the short notice. He was speaking in low tones to his client, gesturing with controlled precision, projecting the calm confidence of a defense attorney who had managed worse situations. Meeks looked different in custody, smaller, older. The authority that had radiated from him in the courtroom was gone, replaced by something Simone had not expected. Fear. Good. She moved to the next observation window. Cordell Fry sat ramrod straight, hands folded on the table, expression blank. His attorney, a younger woman Simone did not recognize, was reviewing documents, occasionally asking questions that Fry answered with monosyllables. He would be the hardest to break. Lawyers knew the system, knew how to navigate it, knew that silence was almost always the best defense. The third window showed Preston Vance. He was pacing, short, agitated steps that carried him from wall to wall and back again. His attorney, a heavy-set man with a sweating forehead, was trying to calm him down, but Vance kept shaking his head, kept gesturing, kept muttering words that the observation room's speakers did not quite capture. Vance was scared. That could be useful. Simone found Ray in the hallway. Any word on Granger? Nothing. Sheriff's department says he didn't show up for work this morning. His car is gone. His apartment is cleared out. Ray shook her head. He knew we were coming. Someone tipped him off. Probably. We're reviewing communications, but... Ray shrugged. If he's smart, he's already out of state. Simone looked back at the observation windows, at the 3 men who had built a system to steal from the vulnerable, now sitting in holding cells, waiting to learn their fate. 3 out of 4, not enough. What about Nadine Ashworth? Also missing, hasn't been seen since last night. Ray paused. You think she ran? Simone remembered the rest stop, the USB drive, the look on Nadine's face when she said they were going to kill her anyway. I think she gave us everything she had, and then disappeared before anyone could stop her. Should we issue a warrant? Simone considered. Nadine Ashworth was a co-conspirator. Her name was on documents, her signature on certifications, her fingerprints all over a scheme that had destroyed 73 families. By any standard of justice, she should face the same consequences as the others. But she had also been coerced, threatened, trapped in a system she did not create and could not escape. And she had given Simone the evidence that made all of this possible. Hold off for now. Focus on the 3 we have. Nadine Ashworth isn't going anywhere. The grand jury convened 6 weeks later. It was the longest 6 weeks of Simone's career. Defense attorneys filed motion after motion, to suppress evidence, to dismiss charges, to exclude witnesses, to challenge every aspect of the investigation that had brought their clients to this point. Harrison Blake alone filed 47 separate motions, each one requiring response, each one consuming time and resources that Simone could barely spare. But the evidence held. The emails from Nadine's USB drive were authenticated by FBI forensic specialists. The financial records were corroborated by bank documents obtained through subpoena. The original court transcripts were compared to the doctored versions filed with the county, revealing systematic falsification that could not be explained away. And one by one, the witnesses came forward. Curtis Beaumont testified first. He told the grand jury about his grandmother, about the eviction, about 14 months of complaints that went nowhere. His voice cracked when he described watching Odessa being led to the patrol car, clutching a cardboard box that held 77 years of family history. Other families followed. The Jenkinses, whose matriarch had been declared incapacitated despite scoring normally on every cognitive test. The Crawfords, whose ancestral land had been sold for 1/3 of its appraised value. The Thompsons, the Washingtons, the Mitchells, family after family, story after story, a catalog of theft that stretched back 6 years and forward into generations of lost inheritance. The grand jury returned indictments on all counts. Harlan Meeks, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, obstruction of justice. 47 years in federal prison if convicted on all charges. Cordell Fry, conspiracy, wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, legal malpractice, 32 years. Preston Vance, conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, receiving stolen property, 28 years. The news broke on a Thursday morning. By Friday, it was national. The trial was scheduled for October. But before the trial could begin, there was another proceeding to complete: the Alabama Judicial Qualifications Commission review of Judge Harlan Meeks. The JQC hearing room was smaller than Simone expected. Wood-paneled walls, a raised dais where 5 commissioners sat, a witness chair positioned to maximize the discomfort of whoever occupied it. The gallery held perhaps 30 seats, all filled with reporters and observers who had come to watch the final dismantling of a 22-year judicial career. Meeks sat at the respondent's table with Harrison Blake. He had aged visibly since the arrest. The silver hair that had been so carefully styled was now gray and thin. The commanding presence that had dominated Chambers County courtrooms was gone, replaced by the hunched posture of a man who knew he had already lost. Commission Chairman Evelyn Torres called the hearing to order. This proceeding is to determine whether Judge Harlan Meeks has violated the Alabama canons of judicial ethics and whether his conduct warrants removal from the bench. She looked at Simone. The state may present its case. Simone stood. She had spent 3 months preparing for this moment. 3 months of document review, witness preparation, legal research. 3 months of imagining what she would say when she finally stood in a room with Harlan Meeks and was given the opportunity to speak. Commissioners, the evidence before you tells a story of systematic corruption unprecedented in Alabama judicial history. She walked to the podium. Did not look at Meeks. Did not need to. Over a period of 6 years, Judge Meeks presided over 73 guardianship cases involving elderly black landowners. In every case, he signed orders declaring individuals incapacitated without proper notice, without proper hearings, without proper legal representation. In every case, he appointed the same attorney, Cordell Fry, as guardian ad litem. In every case, the resulting property was sold to the same buyer, Vance Properties LLC, at prices well below market value. She placed a document on the podium. I'm presenting as Exhibit 1 the statistical analysis previously submitted to federal court. The probability of this pattern occurring by chance is less than 1 in 400 million. This was not coincidence. This was not mistake. This was a deliberate scheme to steal property from vulnerable citizens under the protection of judicial authority. Blake rose. Objection. The respondent has not been convicted of any crime. This commission should not prejudge matters currently before the federal courts. Torres shook her head. Mr. Blake, this is not a criminal proceeding. The standard here is whether Judge Meeks's conduct violated judicial ethics, not whether it violated criminal law. The objection is overruled. Continue, Ms. Aldridge. Simone nodded. Exhibit 2. Email correspondence recovered from county servers. These emails, spanning 4 years, show direct communication between Judge Meeks and Preston Vance regarding property acquisitions. In one email dated March 12th of this year, Vance writes, and I quote, HM approved expedited processing. The initials HM correspond to the respondent. She looked at Meeks for the first time. He was staring at the table. Not at her, not at the commissioners, just at the wood grain beneath his folded hands, as if searching for an escape that did not exist. Exhibit 3. Original court transcripts recovered from backup servers. These transcripts document hearings that were never reflected in the official record. In one hearing, dated September 14, 2021, a defendant named Willie Mae Jenkins pleaded with Judge Meeks to allow her son to testify on her behalf. Judge Meeks's response, recorded but never transcribed, was, "This court doesn't have time for family reunions. The ward is incapacitated. Next case." The gallery stirred. Ms. Jenkins was 84 years old. She had lived on her property for 61 years. She was removed from her home 2 days after that hearing and died in the county care facility 3 months later. Her land was sold to Vance Properties for $42,000. Current market value, $178,000. Simone let the numbers hang in the air. Commissioners, Judge Meeks did not merely violate judicial ethics. He weaponized his position to facilitate theft on a massive scale. He betrayed every principle that the judiciary is supposed to represent. And he did it for 6 years, to 73 families, without a single moment of hesitation or remorse. She gathered her documents. The state requests that Judge Harlan Meeks be permanently removed from the Alabama judiciary and barred from ever holding judicial office again. Harrison Blake's defense was what Simone expected. He argued procedural violations. He argued constitutional concerns. He argued that Meeks was a scapegoat, a victim of overzealous prosecution, a dedicated public servant whose only crime was trusting the wrong people. He did not argue innocence, because there was no argument for innocence. The emails were real. The transcripts were real. The 73 families who had lost their land were real. No amount of legal maneuvering could make those facts disappear. The commission deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, Chairman Torres's face was grim. The commission finds that Judge Harlan Meeks has violated Canons 1, 2, and 3 of the Alabama Canons of Judicial Ethics. His conduct constitutes a fundamental betrayal of judicial responsibility and public trust. She looked at Meeks. "Judge Meeks, you are hereby removed from the Alabama judiciary effective immediately. You are permanently barred from holding judicial office in this state. This finding will be reported to the federal court for consideration in pending criminal proceedings." Meeks did not react. He sat motionless as Blake gathered documents, as reporters rushed to file stories, as the commission adjourned and the room began to empty. He sat until Blake touched his shoulder, until the reality of what had just happened finally penetrated whatever shell he had built around himself. Then he stood, walked toward the exit, passed within 3 feet of Simone without looking at her, and stopped. "You think you've won?" His voice was barely a whisper. "You think this is justice?" Simone met his eyes. "I think 73 families lost everything because you decided their land was worth more than their lives. I think you sat on that bench for 22 years and used it as a weapon against people who couldn't fight back. And I think that today, for the first time, you're facing consequences." Meeks's face twisted. "This isn't over." "No," Simone's voice was steady. "It's not. You still have a federal trial. You still have 73 families waiting to testify against you, and you still have the rest of your life to think about what you did." She turned away. "Enjoy it." The federal trial began in October. It lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented over 400 exhibits, called 37 witnesses, built a case so comprehensive that even Harrison Blake's considerable skills could not dismantle it. Curtis Beaumont testified on day 12. He told the jury about his grandmother, about the land his great-grandfather had bought in 1947, about 14 months of complaints that went nowhere, and a system that seemed designed to protect the people stealing from his family. When the defense cross-examined him, Blake tried to suggest that Curtis had exaggerated, that his grandmother's incapacity was real, that the guardianship was justified. Curtis's response was quiet and devastating. My grandmother remembered every birthday of every grandchild she ever had. She could recite poetry she learned in 1952. She managed her own finances until the day they took her from her home. He looked at the jury. If that's incapacitated, then I don't know what capable looks like. Odessa Mabry testified on day 18. She was 92 years old now, frail but fierce. She sat in the witness chair with the particular dignity of a woman who had survived things the jury could not imagine, and she told them about her father, about the land, about 77 years of paying taxes on property that someone else had decided she did not deserve to keep. When the prosecutor asked her what she wanted from this trial, her answer was simple. I want my home back, and I want them to know that what they did was wrong. The defense called no witnesses. Blake's closing argument was a masterpiece of deflection, constitutional concerns, procedural questions, reasonable doubt. He spoke for 3 hours, weaving a narrative that painted Meeks as a victim of circumstances, a dedicated judge who had been manipulated by others. Simone's closing was shorter. 73 families, $4 million, 6 years. One judge who signed every order, one lawyer who filed every petition, one buyer who purchased every property. She looked at the jury. This isn't complicated. This isn't ambiguous. This is theft, conducted under the protection of a courtroom by people who thought they would never be caught. She paused. They were wrong. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. They returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Sentencing came 2 months later. The federal courthouse in Birmingham was packed. Families filled the gallery. The Beaumonts, the Jenkinses, the Crawfords, all 73 families, represented by someone who had come to watch the people who stole from them face judgment. Simone sat at the prosecution table. She had not slept well in weeks. The trial had consumed everything: her time, her energy, her capacity for anything except the relentless work of pursuing justice. But today, finally, it would end. Judge Thornton, the same judge who had denied Meeks's emergency motion 9 months earlier, presided over sentencing. He called the defendants one by one. Preston Vance went first. Mr. Vance, you have been convicted of conspiracy, wire fraud, and money laundering. Your scheme enriched you by over $4 million at the expense of vulnerable elderly citizens. Thornton's voice was cold. I sentence you to 22 years in federal prison. Vance's face went white. His attorney steadied him as he was led away. Cordell Fry was next. Mr. Fry, you were entrusted with protecting the people you were appointed to serve. Instead, you betrayed that trust for personal profit. I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison. Fry said nothing, did nothing, simply stood and walked toward the marshals with the empty expression of a man who had accepted his fate long ago. Then Harlan Meeks. He rose slowly. The man who had commanded Chambers County courtrooms for 22 years now stood before a judge who commanded him. Thornton studied him for a long moment. Judge Meeks, I have presided over many sentencing hearings. I have seen criminals of every kind, murderers, fraudsters, traffickers, but I have rarely seen a defendant whose crimes caused as much damage as yours. Meeks did not respond. You were entrusted with the most sacred responsibility our society offers, the administration of justice. You used that responsibility to steal from people who trusted the system you represented. You signed orders that destroyed families, that took land that had been held for generations, that reduced elderly citizens to wards of a court that existed only to exploit them. Thornton leaned forward. I sentence you to 34 years in federal prison. You will be 78 years old when you are eligible for parole. I hope that in those years you find some capacity for understanding the harm you have caused. Meeks's knees buckled. Blake caught him, steadied him, helped him stand as the marshals approached. And in the gallery, Curtis Beaumont was crying. The aftermath was slower than Simone expected. Sentences were appealed. Property recovery proceedings dragged through courts for months. Insurance claims were filed and disputed. The machinery of justice, having finally engaged, ground forward with the particular slowness of systems designed by lawyers for lawyers. But progress came. 12 families received restitution payments from assets seized during the investigation. 8 properties were returned to their original owners through court order. The Alabama State Bar permanently disbarred Cordell Fry and issued new guidelines for guardian ad litem appointments. And Odessa Mabry went home. The ceremony was small. Just family, a few neighbors. Simone standing at the edge of the yard where Isaiah Mabry had planted a garden 77 years earlier. Curtis helped his grandmother up the porch steps, opened the door that had been locked since the day they took her away. Odessa stood in the doorway. She did not speak, did not need to, just touched the frame with one hand, the wall with the other, the physical reality of a home she had never expected to see again. Then she turned to Simone. "Thank you." 2 words. Nothing more. But they carried the weight of everything. The investigation, the trial, the months of work that had brought them to this moment. "Thank you for not giving up." Simone nodded. "That's my job, Mrs. Mabry." "No." Odessa shook her head slowly, the same gesture she had made in the county care facility 9 months earlier. "Your job is prosecuting fraud, not giving up when everyone tells you to. That's something else." She walked into her house. The door closed behind her, and Simone stood alone in the yard where Isaiah Mabry had built a life, watching afternoon light filter through trees that had stood for longer than any of them had been alive. 1 month later, Simone was back in her Montgomery office. The Chambers County case was closed. Officially, finally, completely. The files had been archived. The press had moved on to other stories. The 73 families were scattered across Alabama, rebuilding lives that had been interrupted by a system designed to destroy them. But not everything was resolved. Simone opened her laptop, pulled up the file she had been avoiding for weeks. The email from Preston Vance. The one with the redacted recipient. The one that said HM approved expedited processing. She had assumed HM meant Harlan Meeks, but the email had been sent to a county government address. And Meeks had never used county email. All his communications had been through personal accounts, carefully separated from official channels. Someone else in Chambers County had been involved, someone whose identity was still hidden behind that redaction. Simone's phone buzzed. Text from Ray. "You seeing the news?" Simone switched to a browser, pulled up the Montgomery Advertiser's website. The headline made her blood run cold. "Body found in Chambers County, identified as former court clerk." She read the article twice. Nadine Ashworth, found in a wooded area outside town. Cause of death, pending investigation. No suspects identified. Simone stared at the screen. Nadine had known something, had given Simone everything she had disappeared before anyone could stop her. And now she was dead. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Chambers County area code. Simone answered. "Aldridge." A long pause. Static on the line. Then a voice. Male. Low. Unfamiliar. "You should have left it alone." The line went dead. Simone sat in her office, surrounded by files and awards, and the accumulated evidence of a career spent pursuing justice, and realized that the Chambers County case was not over. It had only begun. 3 months later. The Alabama Attorney General's office had opened a new investigation, not into Meeks, Fry, or Vance, but into the broader network that had supported their scheme. Simone led the task force. They traced financial connections that extended far beyond Chambers County, found shell companies registered in Delaware, Nevada, offshore jurisdictions that specialized in hiding money, identified patterns suggesting that Chambers County was not unique, that similar schemes might be operating in other rural counties across Alabama. Hoyt Granger was still missing. The FBI had issued a federal warrant, but Granger had vanished completely. No credit card activity, no phone records, no sightings. Whoever had helped him disappear had resources and expertise that suggested professional assistance, and the redacted email recipient remained unidentified. Simone had subpoenaed county server records, interviewed former employees, traced every digital footprint she could find. But the identity of the person who had received Preston Vance's message, the person who had approved expedited processing alongside Harlan Meeks, remained hidden. Someone with power, someone with access, someone who had watched the entire investigation unfold and managed to stay invisible. The phone on her desk rang. Aldridge? Ms. Aldridge, this is Agent Torres with the FBI. The voice was tense. We found Granger. Simone sat up straight. Where? Mexico. Nogales. Local police picked him up on an unrelated matter and ran his prints. Torres paused. He wants to talk, says he has information about Chambers County, information that wasn't in the files. What kind of information? He says there's someone else, someone above Meeks, someone who's been running operations like this across 3 states for over a decade. Simone closed her eyes. The scheme had seemed complete. The verdicts had seemed final. The justice had seemed, if not perfect, at least sufficient. But justice was never complete, never final, never sufficient. There was always another layer, another conspirator, another wrong waiting to be exposed. When can I interview him? We're arranging extradition now. Should have him in custody within 72 hours. I'll be ready. She hung up, opened a new file on her computer, started typing. The final hearing in the Chambers County property recovery case was held on a Tuesday in March. The courtroom was nearly empty, just Simone, a few attorneys, and the families whose claims were being finalized. The press had lost interest months ago. The public had moved on to other outrages, other injustices, other stories that captured attention for a news cycle before fading into noise. But for the families who filled the gallery, this was everything. Judge Patricia Womack presided, a state judge appointed specifically because she had no connection to Chambers County, no relationship to any of the defendants, no history that could be used to challenge her impartiality. She reviewed the final property distribution order. This court hereby orders the return of the following properties to their original owners or their designated heirs. She read the list. 12 names, 12 families, 12 pieces of land that would return to the people who had never stopped believing they belonged there. Not 73, not even close. But 12 was better than 0. 12 was proof that the system, broken, slow, frustrating as it was, could sometimes be forced to work. Curtis Beaumont sat in the front row. His grandmother had died 2 months earlier, peacefully, in her own home, surrounded by family. She had lived long enough to see justice, long enough to sleep in the house her father had built, long enough to know that 77 years of struggle had not been for nothing. When the hearing ended, Curtis found Simone in the hallway. Thank you. His voice was thick. For everything. I'm sorry it took so long. My grandmother used to say that justice is patient, that it moves slow because it has to be sure. Curtis smiled, the first genuine smile Simone had seen from him since they met. She was right. She was a wise woman. She was. Curtis looked out the window, at the Montgomery skyline, at the world beyond the courthouse that continued to turn regardless of what happened inside. What now? For you? Simone thought about the new investigation, about Granger waiting to be interviewed, about the redacted email and the unnamed conspirator and the network that stretched across state lines. More work. There's always more work. Will it ever be enough? Simone considered the question. Harlan Meeks would die in prison. Cordell Fry and Preston Vance would spend decades behind bars. 12 families had recovered their land. 73 families had their stories told in open court, documented in official records, validated by verdicts that could never be erased. But Nadine Ashworth was dead. Hoyt Granger had fled the country. The unnamed conspirator remained free. And somewhere, in other counties, other states, other quiet corners of a system designed to protect the vulnerable, other schemes were probably unfolding. No, Simone met Curtis's eyes. It's never enough. But it's better than nothing. And sometimes, that's all we get. Curtis nodded slowly. My grandmother would have liked you. I would have liked her too. They shook hands. Curtis walked away, back to Chambers County, back to the land his family had held for almost 80 years, back to a life that had been interrupted but not destroyed. Simone watched him go. Then she turned and walked back to her office. There was work to do. The sun was setting over Montgomery when Simone finally left the Justice Building. Orange light painted the government buildings gold, softened the harsh edges of concrete and glass, made the city look almost beautiful in the fading day. She walked to her car, sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. On her phone, a text from Ray. Granger extradition confirmed. Arrives Thursday. Interview scheduled for Friday 9 a.m. She typed back, I'll be ready. Then she looked at the skyline, at the city that had been her home for 15 years, at the buildings that housed the machinery of justice. Slow, imperfect, frustrating, but real. Harlan Meeks was in federal prison. Cordell Fry was in federal prison. Preston Vance was in federal prison. 12 families had their land back. 73 families had their stories heard. And the investigation continued. It would always continue. That was the nature of the work. Not a destination, but a journey. Not a victory, but a process. Not an ending, but an endless series of beginnings. Simone started her car, drove home through streets that were starting to empty, past buildings that were starting to darken, toward a night that would be too short, and a tomorrow that would bring new challenges, new obstacles, new opportunities to make the system work the way it was supposed to. The Chambers County case was closed, but justice was never closed. It was always waiting, always demanding, always calling for someone to stand up and fight. Simone Aldridge answered that call. She always would.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.